Every day in Iowa City, I see people in passing, and I think to myself,
I wonder who that person is.
Did he grow up here?
Or did he come for college and
end up staying because
he got a grant for his research?
Or maybe the love of his life.
If he's a townie, they
decide to raise their kids here.
In Iowa City, today I see people every day
And wonder,
what's her story? And wonder
what she does for a living.
I see her around.
Walking her dog.
Maybe she's the writer of
that book I loved so much.
maybe she's a dancer.
A chef.
Iowa City
It's interesting like that.
The guy sitting next to you on the bus
could be your new favorite singer. That lady who
held the door open for you.
Could be a filmmaker.
A politician.
I see people
every day and wonder.
What's your story?
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 it's your story. Descendant of generations of Brahmin priests, Cheeni Rao grew up straddling two cultures, as do many first-generation Americans, trying to meet the high expectations of his traditional Indian family, while just trying to fit in. In his new powerful memoir, In Hanuman's Hands, Cheeni weaves his story with the story of his Indian ancestors and the Indian epic of Ramayana. In Hanuman's Hands tells his story from birth and into college, where, in his words, drugs gave him the power to hear the divine in the way his ancestors had. Cheeni's spiritual awakening, which led to his recovery from drug addiction, came in the form of help from Hanuman, the Hindu monkey god, who came to him in his darkest moment to show him the way. Meet Cheeni Rao. This is his story. So you said in your book that you had been writing for a long time prior to college in order to deal with the internal chaos of your own mind. What I found really interesting in your book was that in order to gain the trust of the reader, you established yourself as someone who is not honest. I'm just curious about how that has played out in your life, in your actual life outside of this book, sort of confessing all of these things and everything from your childhood into adulthood.
I haven't heard too many people reacting to those confessions outside of my family. I mean, other people. I think what ends up happening because of that whole setup of that I say in the book, that basically I grew up a kind of a liar just because of straddling two cultures and just trying to kind of struggle with it. I think when people look at a lot of these events, they're not sure what's fiction, what's actually just pure memoir. I guess they're believing it's memoir, but nobody's ever questioning me about it or asking questions.
Right.
But my family does for sure.
Sure.
My sister is like, "What the hell were you doing? Is that what you were doing? You were jumping out of the house, running around doing things?" It's like, yeah, because I used to break into houses, do all this stuff, and they had no idea. But because I think they slept pretty well, and I was pretty quiet, and so they never figured it out. And so now for them, it's really shocking. They feel like maybe they should have seen some of that, or known ahead of time what was going on, and they could have maybe stopped me from going off the deep end like I did.
Right, and I think so much of your story does have to do with these two cultures, growing up in an Indian American family and whatever America is, and trying to fit into that, and the sense of you or your character, and I kind of struggle with that as well, as an outsider, you seeing yourself as an outsider, and trying to find yourself on the inside.
Yeah, I think I think that sometimes that whole thing of being an outsider is also part of like what a lot of writers have too, just in general. I think it's people who have that tend to be observing and kind of witnessing what's going on around them. And so for me, I think just because of not really feeling sure of how I fit into like my culture or my family, or into school systems. I mean, like I didn't know what to do at school other than go to classes, and like I didn't really, I'd study, I'd try to get good grades. I didn't really understand like a lot of the things that were kind of going on just because of, my own family. We didn't necessarily watch TV or, listen to, like I didn't really know what was going on with popular music. I mean, we were listening to different stuff at home. and you know, at home I was reading like comic books that were like Indian mythology and hearing these stories from my parents. So I had no clue. Like I'd go in and they'd be talking about like Care Bears or you know, Cabbage Patch Kids or whatever it was, you know. I had no idea. So I was just like, okay, this is supposed to be something I want and I can't figure out why. And so I just kind of like kept my distance from those kinds of things.
And I like what you said about writers sitting on the outside and observing, and that kind of being a common characteristic of writers. So I think that's really true. But you don't necessarily know that as a kid. I did the same thing as a kid.
I think everybody's got that in them. You know what I mean? It's just you know, we all have that bit of an outsider. I mean, every time we're entering into something unfamiliar, something new, I don't know, in a weird way, that's, you know, that's been something that I've been struggling with my entire life. And then that's also something in particular coming to Iowa. I've been here now 10 years where it doesn't feel like I'm an outsider anymore. I feel like I've kind of found a place that's comfortable where I'm not, you know, just kind of freaked out. I've got my own patterns and rhythms here. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the quest of our lives in some ways, is just to find that place where we're comfortable.
Yeah. And where were you at in your relationship with sobriety and when you came to Iowa City? And you know, were you still? Because I know a lot of people when they're working on staying sober, coming to a new community, you have an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And this is kind of one of those towns where it's small enough that you can kind of have some anonymity.
I dig what you're saying. I think what ended up happening for me when I came here was that I just was telling everybody, okay, I don't do anything. You know, I'm not drinking, not doing drugs or anything like that. And kind of the complication for me is that in terms of, and I haven't kept clean and sober from the point when I first started my sobriety in '95 in Chicago. I've had challenges that hit me while I was here too, and so I've struggled with that in different ways. But one thing that's different about Iowa versus Chicago or some of the other places I've been is that I felt like I could always kind of find help pretty easy, and I also just, it didn't seem like I was getting exposed to the same kinds of, well, I didn't go off the deep end in the same way. You know, I just kind of spiraled pretty quickly, recognized what was going on, and there's a lot of help around here if you look for it. So.
Yeah, I know there's a really strong, supportive community, healing community in that way. And I have a friend who has said to me, this is probably one of the best places in the world to stay sober.
Yeah. I mean, it entirely depends on who you come in contact with. I mean, I think that's part of it. Because I've heard some people say that about Chicago, just certain parts of recovery. It's like, yeah, I couldn't do it in these other towns. Because that's the thing that they keep talking to me about, like the guys at the recovery house. Whenever I talk to them, they're like, well, you know, what we were known for in that part of Chicago for that kind of recovery was like a really just hard knuckle, no BS kind of a thing. And so they have this assumption that in Iowa it's going to be all touchy-feely and everything. They're like, we don't even know how you could keep sober out there. When we had people like that around us, we just ripped them off. You know, so.
Now we've touched upon a couple of the narratives that go throughout the books. We've talked about your family. We've touched upon the house, tats and the house and the recovery house and you also talk about your college career in the book, and
I don't know if you could call it a career so much as like, you know, a time of misadventure and debauchery and just like kind of, yeah.
Well, I feel like that kind of revisits the theme of the outsider too, because college for so many people is I'm escaping my family, I'm escaping high school, I can reinvent myself, I can be whoever I want to be. And for so many people, that ends up being the person who parties, and that's where they think they've found their
test your limits, and it's usually like those areas that were most constricted before, right? I mean, wouldn't that be a good place to start? So, yeah, no. When I think about it, that college experience, it's also an interesting college experience in terms of class and stuff like that. That I don't think you necessarily see as much here in Iowa City, just like these extremes of wealth and these people that are accustomed to that just a certain way of life and certain expectations that come with that. Just I think here people tend not to be